just to show you what I'm talking about, I'm selecting name and value from $v system parameter where name equals control files. So let's go ahead and execute this and see how my output shows everything just squished together, these three values. Now, if I make a modification to this and I say from $v system parameter 2, your output looks a little bit different. I'd like to show you an example of having a session parameter override a system parameter. Now, one of our parameters is called statistics level, and that has to do with gathering statistics to make your queries run smoother. And we'll touch more on this when we talk about performance a little bit. What I'm doing is I'm saying alter session, set statistics level equals basic. So this will only affect this session. Okay, it will not affect the other sessions. Okay, it tells us that our session is altered. Now, if we type in show parameter statistics level, it tells us that it is basic. Okay, now let's look at it on the system level. Let's say select value from $v system parameter where name equals statistics level, and you'll see that it's set to typical. But if we do the same query except saying $v parameter, same where clause, it tells us basic. So you can have two different values for your system and your session parameters. I'd also like to take a closer look at the $v parameter 2 and $v system parameter 2. The structure is almost identical. Let's focus in on the $v parameter 2. Now, we already talked about is session modifiable and is system modifiable. You can also see if it's set to the default value. So is default will show up as either yes or no. Is modified will either show up as false or modified or sys modified. Okay, so if it hasn't been modified at all on the system or session level, then it will say false. If it says modified, then it was modified on the session level, and sys modified means it was modified on the system level. Is adjusted tells us whether or not the Oracle system itself made an adjustment to it automatically. There are several parameters that are automatically adjusted just to make things a little convenient for us, especially dealing with memory parameters. And this update comment here, we dealt with comments a few minutes ago. You can add comments whenever you're modifying your parameters. So that would show up here. Let's also look at $v SP parameter. That shows us what the settings are for the SP file. Okay, so you'll have the SID. In our case, we only have one SID, which is ORCL. The name, the value, the display value, it might be different from the value. If you've got several strings concatenated together, is specified will show up as either true or false. True means that it was explicitly stated in the SP file. False means that it was dynamically adjusted with the alter command. And then ordinal, you'll see that that actually appears on both of these dictionary views. That's also used for strings. If you've got, for example, control files, that's going to be a series of strings, and it will tell you which one is in which position. If you're curious what some of the valid values are for certain parameters, the best way to do that is to query $v parameter valid values. Or you can just go out to the internet, whichever is easiest for you. I like having everything at my fingertips. I have been in situations where I didn't have access to the internet, so it's all here. Select name value is default, that'll be true or false, from $v parameter valid values where name equals, and then you put in your parameter name. Notice in all these queries when I'm referencing these parameter names that they're in all lowercase letters. That's pretty much the only time you're going to put things in lowercase letters inside of those quotes is when you're dealing with parameter names. Okay, so we execute this, and the three available values are basic, typical, and all. And like I said, we'll talk about what these values mean. It has to do with statistics collection. And the default value is typical. And the last data dictionary view we'll talk about is $v obsolete parameter. Now, why in the world would you want to know about the obsolete parameters if you're not going to use them? Well, sometimes you are going to encounter a situation where you've got a database behaving strangely, and maybe someone set up some obsolete parameters that they shouldn't have, And instead of going one by one and looking it up in the official documentation, it's easier to just look at this and see which ones have been set. So let's take a look at my query. Select star from $v obsolete parameter. Okay, lots of stuff splashes across the screen. Please notice that in the is specified column, everything says false here. If you have anything that says true, it means that this obsolete parameter has actually been set in the initialization file, which is a bad thing. In fact, a better query would be to say select star from obsolete parameter where is specified equals true. If any rows come back, then you should examine, well, why has it been set to an obsolete parameter, and you should make it your goal to get rid of that parameter. Wrapping up this nugget, we talked about the special administration privileges required to start up and shut down and alter the database. Remember, we have the sysdba privilege, which allows you to do anything, and we have the sysoper privilege, which allows you to start up, shut down, and change the state of the database. We also talked about our different steps in startup and shutdown. Remember, we have the no mount stage. No mount is when the initialization file is read and the background processes and memory structures are started up. And then we have the mount stage. That's where the control file is read and the instance is associated with the database. And then we have the open stage, where the database is actually available to the end users. Then we have the different ways of shutting down our database. We have shutdown normal, which actually we don't even use that often because it requires every user to log out of their session, and you might have some users that went off to lunch and forgot to log out. We have transactional, so shutdown transactional just means that Oracle's waiting for the users to finish up their transactions, for all of those to finish up. Then we have shutdown immediate, which is the most commonly used way of shutting down, and that just terminates all of the sessions and shuts down the database. And then we have shutdown abort, which is our last resort. If you perform this shutdown abort, it is going to require instance recovery when the database starts up again. So once again, very last resort. Then we talked about our initialization file and our SP file. Remember, the initialization file is a text file and it's only read once upon database startup. The SP file is more of a dynamic file. It's a binary file and you can dynamically change it while the database is up and running. So some of the parameters you can change right then and there. Some of them you have to say scope equals SP file and the change doesn't stick until you bounce the database. So remember, changing your initialization parameters on the system level requires an alter system statement, and on the session level it's alter session. And creating your P file from an SP file and vice versa is pretty easy. You're just going to say create P file from SP file. You can also give specific names instead of relying on the default names. So since that SP file is a binary file, if you want to take a look at the actual contents of that, it might be a good idea to dump that to a P file and then read it. And then we covered our data dictionary views, those $v views. For example, $v parameter, $v parameter 2. $v parameter. As a sysdba, you can look into those dynamic views and see what the settings are. And you can also see what the possible valid values are for each parameter. Well, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.